Good morning. It is a real honor and pleasure to be here. I really would like to congratulate Minister Kim In-kyung for organizing this very important conference, as Korea really needs to take a leadership role in sustainable development goals and also in climate change. I will present to you what I think are some global issues and what is the current process of assessment of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. First, I would like to talk about Sustainable Development Goals. As most of you know what the Sustainable Development Goals are, I just present to you the 17 goals one more time. The 2030 Agenda has two goals, two very important goals. The first one is to leave no one behind, but the other one, as Secretary General Pan Ki-moon just said, it is really about saving our planet. There is no plan B. It is to save our planet. So with these two goals, we're trying to incorporate economic, social, environmentally sustainable development. And for the responsibilities of member states, we now have dual responsibilities. If the MDGs, if we are just focused on international development cooperation through official development assistance, the SDGs require member states to look at SDGs in the domestic implementation. And I really commend Minister Kim for taking the leadership in the Korean government to make SDGs mainstream. The global challenges that I see, or major issues in the implementation and assessment of MDGs, I list three. SDGs were basically decided through a political process. And because it was a politically agreed process, it requires voluntary implementation. There is no legal mandate to do this, so it's voluntary, and member states have different responsibilities according to their current status. So further verification, I think, is really critical to have more science-based research and empirical evidence to guide our sustainable development goals. And secondly, because the whole world was involved in making the sustainable development goals, there's 17 goals and 169 targets. But the member states and all of us are required to do this as integrated process. We cannot go and cherry pick what we want to do, but we must do it together with the spirit of leaving no one behind and to save our planet. Third, the challenges and tasks for the Global Sustainable Development Report team that I am a member of is the UN has mandated us to have a very strong science and policy interface. As the SDGs was more of a political process, we're now asked to bring in scientific evidence to bear upon sustainable development goals. Finally, we want to make sure that the universal and indivisible and integrated nature of the 2030 Agenda is implemented. So in our GSDR, we're looking at interlinkages, trade-offs, as well as co-benefits. When the conference organizers contacted me, they asked me to focus mostly on the implementation and the assessment. How is the assessment process going on? First of all, the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, or better known for HLPF, is the forum in which member states come with our reports. This is the main UN platform for sustainable development goals. It's convened by the Economic and Social Council, or known as ECOSOC. The timeline is we have various goals outlined for each year, and this year is transformation toward sustainable and resilient societies. And finally, the HLPF countries are supposed to provide voluntary national reviews since 2016. The status of SDG progress, incorporation of SDGs into the national frameworks, integration of all social, economic, environmentally sustainable development goals, whether they are being properly integrated, the institutional mechanism in which each government is using to facilitate the implementation of SDGs, and these things are included, or supposed to be included in the VNR. The South Koreans submitted the VNR as one of the first groups in 2016, so instead of providing evidence of what we have achieved, we had provided our plans for SDGs, and I would really like to make sure that we follow through with our VNR. The Global Sustainable Development Report is yet another process. It's called, it was mandated by the UN Secretary General and also by the member states. If the SDGs was a global political process, what we are asked to do is to do scientific research and evidence to bear upon the Sustainable Development Goals. It was mandated by member states, written into the UN law, to provide assessment of Sustainable Development Goals every 4 years by an independent group of scientists. The GSDR in 2019 is the first GSDR report to be submitted. As I mentioned, we are supposed to submit it every 4 years. The first one began its work. The independent group of scientists, 15 of us were appointed by the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon on December 2016. I think this is one of the last letters that he signed, so I was very honored to be appointed. As I mentioned, it's really to strengthen the science policy interface for poverty eradication and sustainable development. And we're trying to incorporate scientific evidence, because if you look at the 17 goals, some have a little bit of tension among each other. If we're trying to do one, there's problem with some other goals and so on. So we're trying to bring scientific evidence and empirical evidence from around the world to educate us and about how we can achieve them in a better way. We are to support the implementation of the 2030 agenda and making sure that these goals are universal and integrated. We're also asked to look at regional differences, that context really matters. What happens in Korea or what we can do in Korea may not be the same what Ghana can do in Ghana, for example. So we're trying to consider regional dimensions and diversity, and also to respect countries with special situations like landlocked countries or countries that are surrounded by sea and not have access to clean water. So the independent group of scientists, the first group that was appointed in 2016, we began work in 2017. We're into our second year. We have two co-chairs, Peter Messerly and Edna Morenigas from Indonesia, Peter from Switzerland. There are 15 of us, and you can see our membership. Many of them are working on the environment, relatively few on social and economic issues, but that's a concern that I have a little bit. And I'm on the committee as well. As you can see, there's only 2 of us from Asia, and I really want to impress upon the minister and all of you to think of the 2 of us serving on this committee to represent not just Korea, but the whole Asia Pacific. Our work is to provide an independent assessment. We're reviewing UN reports and country reports. We're trying to provide an analysis of SDGs based on scientific evidence. We are trying to make policy recommendations to the heads of states as well as the Secretary General. So the HLPF in 2019 will be to the heads of states rather than a ministerial level. And our report, unlike some other UN reports, will not go through the routine regular UN vetting process. We're supposed to do an independent assessment and say whatever we think is sound. So one of our mandates is not just to look at 2030 agenda, but we are supposed to look at 2030 and beyond. What kind of transformations for the future and of Earth and people is needed is one of the things that we're doing. We're supported by a large UN task team led by the UN Secretariat in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs and many other offices, as well as the World Bank. Our report takes after the Brundtland report that Secretary General Ban Ki-moon just mentioned. This came out as our common future, the World Commission on Environment and Development. This was the first time when environment and development was seen as one integrated global problem. In the past, there were concerns about economic development and growth, but regardless of the environmental impact, and the environment focusing so much on sustainability of the environment that may have had conflict and tension with the incentives for growth. So poverty eradication, gender equality, redistribution of wealth, and all these other issues were first presented in our common future. If you have time, this is a really valuable reading, because although this book came out so many years ago, the spirit of sustainable development can be found here, and we at the GSDR committee is really working hard to follow and to show what we can do better beyond our common future. We are trying to provide, as they have done, solutions for sustainable development. The Global Sustainable Development Report 2019, we have identified 4 sort of building blocks in the work that we're doing. First is we are trying to look at the role of science for sustainable development. How can science and scientific evidence and research tell us about what we can do better for attaining sustainable development? And second, in the orange box, we're looking at interactions between sustainable development goals. We're trying to analyze not just the trade-offs when we're working so hard on economic growth. Maybe we have some problems with degradation of the environment or pollution. So we're trying to see where are some bottlenecks in terms of trade-offs, but we're also trying to see where are areas of co-benefits. If we do one, can another area be enhanced? If we focus on girls' health, would it also be related to girls' education, for example? So we're not only looking at trade-offs, but we're really trying hard to look at co-benefits. And third, in the blue box, we're trying to suggest transformations of policies and power and opportunities so that we can have a sustainable future for all of us. So pathways for transformation, we're trying to present major pathways, major vehicles, major strategies to attain sustainable development. We will be making recommendations at the global level, but at the national level to national governments, to the citizens, and so on. So the pathways is perhaps the key of our report. Finally, we want to recognize that there are items and topics that we were not able to deal with when the Sustainable Development Report, Sustainable Development goals were established in 2015. It was to take effect in 2016, but much of the discussion started back in Rio in 2012. So there were a couple of years prior to the Sustainable Development Goals. New issues have arisen. Artificial intelligence, interconnectivity, what we call the fourth industrial revolution, were not really properly dealt with in the Sustainable Development Goals. So in the thinking outside of the box, we're going to present some items and topics that should be considered when we think about the Agenda 2030 and our future going beyond 2030. Our schedule, when I was first appointed in 2016, I thought 2019 is a long time away. But when we started in 2017, we were presented with a very hectic schedule. So we're meeting in UN or other places for intensive workshop. And I mean really, really intensive. We start at 8:30 or 9, work until 6 or 7, have dinner, go back to our hotel rooms, work on the draft and submit it overnight, and then go back to it again. So in these intensive workshops, we're working really hard because we have to write the report. The first draft we have decided that we must finish by the first half of 2018. So in the second half of 2018, we will already start the review process, and then the publishing will be done in early 2019 to be ready to present to the UN Secretary General at the HLFPF in 2019. The role of South Korea in all of this, I think Korea has a unique opportunity and responsibility. As I mentioned, there's only 2 out of 15 members who represent the Asia Pacific. So I think Korea, as one of the 2 members on GSDR, has an opportunity to contribute toward the Sustainable Development Agenda representing the Asia Pacific. It's not just about telling the Korean story, but really bringing evidence and research from the Asia Pacific. I think Korea should play a more active role in soliciting opinions and encouraging participation of other member states in the Asia Pacific in particular. Second, I think it's really critical that we commit and continue our commitment for a successful implementation of Sustainable Development Goals. As I mentioned in my first slide, we have not only an international commitment using our official development assistance, but we also have responsibility for domestic implementation of SDGs. Are the 17 goals fully implemented in South Korea is a real challenge. And as Minister Kim said, we were off track for a while. So I hope with her leadership and the Moon Jae-in government, we're really able to see how sustainable development goals are reflected in all of our government policies. And we must continue with a careful monitoring and evaluation. Finally, I would like to ask for more support for sustainable development and sustainable development goals and the work that we're doing at GSDR. I would like to encourage, although it may be a little too late, but to coordinate regional forums and dialogues so that we can have more information, more cases, more research coming out of Asia Pacific. And in this process, as Asia Pacific is a very diverse region, we have many countries that are very affluent, like Japan and South Korea and perhaps China, but there are many other countries in Southeast Asia and South Asia that really need support from more advanced countries in the region. So if Korea can take a leadership in supporting research and researchers in this region, in particular developing countries, that would be a major contribution. So we need everyone to help together and not wait until tomorrow, but now to reach the 2030 agenda. Thank you very much.